Self-preservation whispered in his ear that he should have stayed in bed and damned the neighbours. It then suggested that it was not too late to sneak back upstairs. Chapter 1. A more agreeable manifestation. Although the man had gone to bed alone, 3 vicious canines were now in the corner of his bedroom, pacing, threatening, moving in on him, and then moving back. Evan knew they were waiting for their pack leader, the alpha dog, to return. A ringing signalled for reinforcements to let him know that his nightmare was about to intensify. The fog cleared in Evan's mind, and it became apparent that the ringing for reinforcements was merely his doorbell. A welcome salvation to the canine attack, which occasionally found its way into his dream state. Evan's canine phobia only entered his world when he was asleep. Not that he liked dogs when he was awake, on account of the nightmares. There were times, however, when he felt as though he could remember days when he enjoyed spending time with dogs, and even weekends when he worked up with them at his Aunt Sheila's kennels. Let's put it this way, he thought. No dogs have ever disturbed my sleep at 1:30 in the morning, ringing my doorbell and knocking on my door. As the smile paid a visit to his face, a thought passed through his mind. What if it's the police? The smile wandered away, not willing to give the impression of disrespect to the already resentful police officers who may have been trying to awaken him for the past 10 minutes. As he quietly negotiated the stairs in his t-shirt and shorts, his mind was torn between the identity of his early morning visitor and the origin of his canine nightmares. As he approached the last few stairs, he deliberately avoided the third one from the bottom, in case a surreptitious retreat was called for. He peeped through a hole in the top half of the door, caused by the departure of a small knot. Just for a moment he thought back to when he was a boy, and he used to imagine that the knot had long since taken it upon itself to run away back to the forest, rather than spend the rest of his existence in a door that looked across at 2 other doors, which never seemed to have the time of day for it. Of course, Evan knew that the knot had simply worked loose and fallen out. That's a type of anecdote, though, which amused Evan, the type which he didn't like to tell people in order to alter the direction of a tedious conversation, which seemed to be the case all too often for the 25-year-old whose tolerance level was more akin to that of a proper fed-up pensioner. He was unable to make out who it was that was at his door, as they were standing too close to the peephole, and still the finger of stubbornness relentlessly pressed the doorbell. "Move back so I can see who it is," he whispered to himself in a barely audible voice, fearful he may alert the visitor to his own presence. No sooner had the whispered words left his mouth when the ringing resigned its post as the attention-seeking instrument which it had been for the last 10 minutes, and then, as though obeying the almost silent command, the doorbell ringing visitor stepped back. Evan's spirits sank when he saw who it was that had been relentlessly pressing his doorbell. Self-preservation whispered in his ear that he should have stayed in bed and damned the neighbours. It then suggested that it was not too late to sneak back upstairs. He entertained the notion that an early morning wake-up call from the police may have been a more agreeable manifestation than a visit from the 2 malingerers who were congregating on his doorstep at the moment. He did consider creeping back upstairs and ignoring the unwelcome disturbers, but as he turned away, the door knocking turned into attention-bringing banging. And so, for the sake of common decency and the neighbours, he resigned himself to unlocking the door. Evan looked at the 2 men, and then at his wrist, shrugged, and then asked, "Really? At this time?" He wondered whether to invite them in, away from any sleepless, prying eyes. Easier to get rid of them if I leave them out in the cold. We need a favour, the taller of the two men told Evan, stepping uninvited into his hallway. Hide that for a while, just until the weekend, he added, pointing towards the unwelcome newcomer parked upon the street. Keep it in your garage until Saturday night, added the other, stockier man. Evan felt as though it sounded more like an order than a request, and as it was accompanied by a look which owned the appearance of intimidation, he was probably correct. Evan knew that the man with the intense eyes which had seen a desperate amount of violence, owned malevolence as a fundamental component to his character. Evan had seen the consequences on enough occasions to know better than to upset him with a disagreeable response. With the deal for the storage of the car agreed, the two visitors left, and with the car safely carried away, Evan returned to his bed, the bed where his imagination never slept. Although warm when he had left to answer the door, it now felt as cold as it did when he had first retired 2 hours earlier. As he lay under the quilt, he cast his mind back to a somewhat bizarre programme which he had watched on a documentary channel. It nearly switched channels just before something caught his attention. It concerned microscopic bed mites. Millions of the things, he thought to himself, millions of the little parasites sharing my bed, and not one of them had the foresight or the decency to keep it warm. He smiled to himself, a brief smile, then his face relaxed, his body warmed, and his mind wandered. His canine nightmare was replaced by bizarre visions of an army of bed mites, clothed in woolen hats, each one carrying a tiny hot water bottle in an attempt to make amends for their previous thoughtlessness and to keep his bed forever warm. He was again dreaming, but this time no nightmare came to haunt him, and no dogs came to hurt him.